So children, in our first video we had discussed about various methods of concentration of ore. Now once the ore is concentrated, the second step is to convert it into metal oxide. So we have two methods for conversion of ore into metal oxides. Number one is calcination and number two is roasting. Here children, the big problem with the children is to learn the difference between the calcination and roasting. I have one very beautiful example which will help you to learn what is roasting and what is calcination. See, both these are heating of the ore at very high temperature below their melting point definitely. But roasting is done in presence of plenty of air, whereas calcination is done in limited supply of oxygen. See children, we roast papad and we roast chickens, and roasting of papads and chickens is done at very high temperature in open air. So open air means having plenty of oxygen, so you can learn it from that way that roasting is always done in open air, that is plenty of air. Now you may be sometime asked for 2 marks to differentiate between roasting and calcination. Roasting is done in excess of air, the very big difference, and calcination is done in the absence or limited supply of air. Air here means oxygen. Roasting is generally done for sulfide ores, whereas calcination is done for carbonate ores. Roasting gives out sulfur dioxide because it is used for sulfide ores, and calcination gives out carbon dioxide because it is making use of carbonate ores. Now we can understand it better with a few with an example. See, zinc sulfide will be roasted involving a lot of oxygen, and the product will be zinc oxide and sulfur dioxide. We are getting metal oxide which we wanted to get, and the byproduct is sulfur dioxide. For calcination, we have zinc carbonate which is heated in absence of air, so that we can get metal oxide and carbon dioxide. Now children, after getting the metal oxide, we need to reduce the metal oxide and to get the crude metal. So here the metallurgy, it is involving all sorts of heat. So we need to understand the thermodynamic principles of reduction of metal oxides to metal. Here Ellingham was a chemist who studied the reduction of metal oxides with the help of heat, and it was called as pyrometallurgy. So what is actually meant by pyrometallurgy? Pyro means heat and metallurgy means process of extraction of metals. So what this gentleman, the chemist, did, he plotted the Gibbs free energy of all the metals at different temperatures to get an idea that how the metal combines with oxygen to give metal oxides and how do they behave. So it is, if you see carefully, this is the Gibbs free energy in kilojoules per mole, and this is the temperature. See children, if you have any break in the straight line curve, it indicates the change in physical state of the metal. Here the metal is melted down, and here again it is melted down. So unless we get this kind of sharp cut in the you can say ki sharp change in the curve, we can easily say that there is no change in the physical state of the metals. So now here you see, this is the curve plotted for the combination of magnesium with oxygen to give magnesium oxide at various temperatures. Fine. So how this Ellingham diagram is useful for us? Before we discuss that, we need to see a few things. This is the curve for the formation of magnesium oxide, and this is the formation of aluminium oxide. Similarly, this is the formation of zinc oxide, and this curve is for the formation of carbon monoxide from carbon and oxygen, and this one is for the formation of carbon dioxide from carbon and oxygen. And see here, this one is very important for the combination of carbon monoxide with oxygen to give CO2. You need to take care of the three main curves here. Number 1, formation of CO2 from C and O2. Number 2, formation of CO from C and oxygen. And number 3 is formation of CO2. The very interesting thing is any metal curve which is lying below the other may be used to reduce the metal upwards. Okay? So in other words, we can say magnesium may be used to reduce the aluminium oxide because the curve of magnesium oxide is lying below that of the aluminium oxide. In the same way, after this temperature, you see this temperature is about more than 1073, where the curve for zinc oxide and carbon monoxide are crossing each other. So above this temperature, carbon can be used to reduce zinc oxide. Fine. And at this temperature, if you come down till here, this is about 11,000 kelvins. So at this temperature you can make use of carbon to produce carbon dioxide, and in due course zinc oxide will be reduced. So the very important thing here to take into account is that at any particular temperature you must see which two curves are crossing. So the downwards curve will be used to reduce the upward curve. Fine children. Now we shall be discussing a few uses of the Ellingham diagram. Children, you may be asked for 1 or 2 to 3 marks. Give 3 uses of Ellingham diagram, and these are: number 1, Ellingham diagram is used to determine the relative ease of reducing a given metallic oxide to metal. It is also used to determine the partial pressure of oxygen that is in equilibrium with metal oxide at a given temperature for the reduction. And number 3, it is used to determine the ratio of carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide that will be able to reduce the metal oxide at a given temperature. But Ellingham diagram also comes with a few problems, with a few limitations. And what are those limitations? And you may be put some 2 marks question on this particular concept. Now children, limitations of Ellingham diagram. It has 2 very big limitations. Number 1, it does not tell us about the kinetics of the reaction. Simply means it will tell you that the reaction is possible, but it will not tell you how slow or how fast the reaction will be. So it may take a few minutes and it may take few days to complete one reduction. So that is a very big problem with this Ellingham diagram, which was sorted out later by some other chemist. Next one, it assumes that all the reactions are in a state of equilibrium, which is not always true, and we know that unless the reaction is in equilibrium, we cannot predict anything about it. Now children, we shall be discussing extraction of a few metals. Number 1, the extraction of iron, which we had started. Iron is a day-to-day metal, and we cannot expect our life without iron. How it is extracted? So I shall be discussing it right from the beginning. Once we identify that a given sample of soil contains iron in it, after the chemical test we start digging out the big stones of iron ores. Then they are crushed into the grinding mills. Then the ore, finally powdered ore, is subjected to the hydraulic washing. After the washing of ore, the ore is dried into the sun so that the extra moisture is removed. Now still, even after the hydraulic washing and drying, this ore is containing a lot of impurities like sand, like organic matter and all those things. So children, we all know that iron is magnetic in nature, or we can say it is attracted towards the external magnetic field. So this finely powdered iron ore is now subjected to the magnetic separation. The magnetic wheel will attract the iron ore, leaving behind all the silica and organic matter, and therefore now what we have in our hand coming out from the magnetic separation is the ore which is having quite very high amount of iron in it. Now This ore is mixed with, coke, that is the coal, heated coal, and then limestone. Children, you can learn it. Iron, heme, coke, Coca-Cola, and limestone with lemon. So here it will be iron ore mixed with coke and limestone, calcium oxide, right? Now children, this iron ore mixed with coke and limestone is charged into the furnace. This furnace is called as blast furnace. Why to name it blast furnace? You see these two air channels. These have blast of hot air, so it produce a blast like of sound. That is why this whole furnace is called as blast furnace. We need to understand its fabrication first, then the reaction in different temperature zones and the products and the charged material. So this blast furnace is having one opening at the top from where iron ore mixed with coke and limestone will be filled. The two channels here will be left for the escape of hot waste gases. Now here this blast furnace is having different temperature zones. The lowest temperature is at the topmost region. Then the middle one will have about 700 degrees of temperature, and then below it will be somewhere about 850 degrees Celsius of temperature, and the bottom most is the most hot part of the furnace, which is about 1500 degrees Celsius. So the what all reactions are taking place in different temperature zones. This is the coolest temperature zone, and here the reduction of iron ore will take place. Carbon monoxide with iron oxide will give carbon dioxide and iron. Here the iron is in liquid state and it will start seeping downwards. It will start leaking downwards, right? And at this temperature zone 850 degrees, it will decompose the limestone, and the limestone will combine with the impurities to give you the slag and again the trash gases here. This is calcium carbonate, which is on heating converting into calcium oxide, that is lime, and a lot of CO2 is produced. Calcium oxide, here it is acting as a flux to combine with the gangue particles, that is the silica, right? So calcium oxide here is a basic flux which is to combine with the acidic impurity, that is silica, to give you the slag. Therefore flux plus impurity gives slag, right? So this calcium silicate will be removed as slag. Now a few more reactions here. Carbon monoxide will react with carbon because there is less of oxygen here in this region, so it will produce more of the carbon monoxide. And when this carbon monoxide comes into contact with the oxygen from this hot air blast, a lot part of it will be converted into CO2. So here at the bottom of this furnace we have two outlets. One is here, you will see that this is top outlet. Top outlet is containing the molten slag which is having the all kind of impurities, and the bottom outlet is having the molten iron. This iron which is obtained here is known as pig iron, children, and this is the first crude iron obtained from the blast furnace. Now we shall be learning the differences between pig iron, cast iron and the wrought iron, and which one of these is most commercially viable and what is the basic difference between them. Now see here the difference between pig iron and cast iron. Children, you may be put some 2 marks question to differentiate between pig iron and cast iron. We know that this is the crude iron obtained from the blast furnace, and cast iron is obtained from the pig iron. Its melting point is about 1200 degrees Celsius and the cast iron melts at about 1250 degrees Celsius. Pig iron is very poor in quality and it is very brittle, whereas the cast iron has a little bit improved brittleness and it may be casted into some tools like your spades and hammers and all. So the pig iron contained large amount of carbon, whereas the cast iron has a little less amount of carbon in it. Pig iron is not suitable for making any articles, but cast iron may be used for making many tools, like I already told you, the hammers, spades, and all those kind of things, scissors. And now then it has already been outlined that it is obtained from the blast furnace, whereas the cast iron is obtained from the cupola furnace. Then again the similar kind of a thing, that pig iron is of about no use for engineering applications, whereas cast iron is quite a very useful form of iron for the engineering applications. Next one is the wrought iron. Wrought iron is the purest form of commercial iron, and this contains least amount of carbon in it, and it is most malleable and ductile. Wrought iron is mainly used for making the good quality furnitures like your beds, chairs, tables, all the sorts of furnitures, window sills, and all those kind of things. So children, till here we are over with the iron.